Hello everyone, thank you for coming to my talk. It's a great pleasure to be part of this forum on teaching aesthetics. I want to thank Dr. Valerie Vino for inviting me. Please excuse me for turning off the camera during the lecture. In my previous writing on Gewu, or Confucian investigation of things, I attempt to argue that the practice of Gewu, or Confucian investigation of things, namely a practice that belongs to the Confucian enterprise, or moral self-cultivation, is an example of the interdependence or inseparability of the ethical and aesthetical dimensions of life. In this talk, I will review some ideas regarding Gewu and also further introduce the idea of cheng wu, or Confucian fulfilment of things, in light of care aesthetics promoted by Yuriko Saito recently. Ultimately, I hope this talk may inform you of some characteristics of the Chinese aesthetic and philosophical tradition. There is an everyday saying in the Chinese language, 君子成人之美, which originally comes from the Analects, a text that recorded Confucian words and deeds. Literally, 成人之美 means 君子, or a Confucian self-cultivated person, helps others to achieve their 美. Well, this character 美 in the modern Chinese language is the exact word for beauty or beautiful. Does Confucius mean that 君子 ought to help others to become beautiful or to facilitate others' aesthetic experience? Before I answer this question, let me say a little more about 美. Like many other Chinese characters, the same word 美 can be used as noun, adjectival, and verb, depending on the context, which means it can be beautiful, beauty, or to beautify, etc. It has been argued that grammatical and metaphysical thinking has an intrinsic relation. These three propositions share the same copula be, which makes the Aristotelian argument for being qua being possible. While the fact that there is no counterpart of the copula be in the classical Chinese language has contributed to its lack of the notion of being, and therefore a lack of substance ontology in the Chinese thought. In aesthetics, the fusion of the functions of verb, noun, and adjectival in the same word 美 seems to reduce the possibility of an essential approach in the Chinese tradition. Here are three ancient forms of the character 美. You can also see its evolvement throughout history. If you look at this ancient form of 美, what do you see? According to the second century Chinese dictionary 说文解字, 美 means delicious or sweet. Its character is composed of the characters for sheep or goat and beak. Among the 6 kinds of domestic animals, sheep or goat is a major source of food. Beauty and 好, namely good or fine, have the same meaning. From the etymological perspective, it is clear that the Chinese word for beauty was originally precisely the opposite of disinterested beauty, an idea that has dominated Western classic aesthetics. It seems 美 is closer to Plato's canon. According to some scholars, canon should be translated by fine or fineness instead of beauty or beautiful. However, as I mentioned earlier, 美 does not have the same Platonic essentialist feature. Now, 成人之美 has long been considered a Confucian virtue, with the statement with the statement that Junzi, or a Confucian self-cultivated person, ought to help others to achieve their fineness, can we elicit a Chinese proposition for care aesthetics? I don't wish to say yes or no to this question for now. What we can say is that, at least in the Chinese tradition, there seems to be a salient entanglement of the so-called ethical and aesthetical dimensions embedded in the etymology and as well as in the common mentality. Now we move to the second part of my talk. In my study of the Chinese Confucian notion Ge Wu, I find a convincing case for arguing the inseparability of the ethical and the aesthetic dimension of life. Ge Wu originates from the pre-Qing Confucian classic, The Great Learning. Thanks to the new Confucian philosophers' creative exegesis, it became a central doctrine in the Confucian teachings from the 13th century. Wu is more than just things qua things. It refers to all objects and events encountered in our everyday life. According to Neo-Confucian philosophers, in the ordinariness of Wu, there is coherent Li. Li means the rules for how things ought to be, and what is meant by ought to be so, 当然 is what is rightly to be done in things, namely being appropriate, 恰好, without any excessiveness or deficiency. 格物 means questing for 礼, for how things ought to be. It is fair to say that Ge Wu is not any scientific empirical analysis or exploration, but a somewhat intuitive grasp of the presence of coherently, attentively, and mindfully conducted alongside everyday activities. As Zhu says, to practice Ge Wu at ease, not as an urgent need. I argue that Ge Wu involves an ethical way of observation which requires aesthetical sensitivity. There was a story of another great Neo-Confucian philosopher, Wang Yangming. He is said to have practiced Ge Wu in his early years by investigating the bamboo. As a hard-working student, he stared at the bamboo for 7 days. Finally, he fainted and fell ill. I assume Wang Yangming couldn't get it right. Being aesthetically attentive to the way of bamboo's life and allowing one's imagination to play freely while observing can hardly cause fainting, even if one finally misses the coherent Li that one is seeking. Moreover, Ge Wu is not merely a way of understanding the reality, but also a practical method of Confucian self-cultivation within daily life. Recognizing the appropriateness in things via the practice of Ge Wu reveals not only what the Confucians regarded as universal moral facts pervasive in the world and embedded by all things, but ultimately a coherent principle within oneself, the possibility and capacity of being appropriate and harmonious within one's own context is revealed. Indeed, New Confucian Ge Wu as a practical method is not foremost articulated for the sake of aesthetic appreciation of the everyday. It is much more than that. I think an insight of Otto Happala sheds light on this blending nature of Ge Wu. When we are talking about everydayness, its aesthetics in this sense, it is difficult to draw any strict line between the ethical and the aesthetic aspects of life, especially in familiarity. Ontological, ethical, and aesthetic considerations are intertwined with each other. From the gliding hawk and the jumping fish, 鸢飞鱼跃, a symbolic image iconized as New Confucian enlightenment, one can identify an immersive aesthetic experience characterized by a sensuous and intuitive recognition of the harmony and contentment of things dwelling in their proper context. This insight into things also leads to a cosmic understanding that both profound and poetic. In his charming poem Observing the Things, Neo-Confucian philosopher Chen Xianzhang, being in awe of cosmic changes, expresses something we may call an aesthetic liberation indeed. Here is my less poetic translation. A spring ripple, a plum of smoke, transforming the transformed and generating the generated, and each self-so. Not me the 7 feet body belongs to. Between heaven and earth, winter and summer, let it change and evolve. I would like to emphasize there is nothing mysterious or transcendental in the Ge-Wu experience. Ge-Wu does not pull us out of the mundane to achieve something sacred or spiritual. Ge-Wu, as attentively and mindfully conducted alongside everyday activities, does not await lifelong changing sudden enlightenment or require forgetting the stakes when the fish are got, or realize a spiritual elevation to the world apart. Therefore, the aesthetic experience facilitated by Ge-Wu does not aim to render the ordinary things and events extraordinary, as suddenly isolated out of the commonplace, shining with an aura. Perhaps it is even the opposite. Ge-Wu intends to see and appreciate things and events in their commonplace, their right place. Only then is there the possibility of proper aesthetical and moral recognition. Zhu gives an example with a fan. One can argue that looking into and appreciating the ordinariness of such a fan used in summer, made and employed as such, may lead us to a recognition of coherent Li and a feeling of being connected within and fusion into a larger context of cosmic life. Things are still things as such, with their particular ways of being. In other words, Ge-Wu is, in Yuriko Saito's terms, experiencing the ordinary as ordinary. The moment of aesthetic and moral recognition facilitated by Ge-Wu provides the feeling of togetherness, unity, and being at home with the familiar. We also realize the nature of everyday life is associated living with other sentient and non-sentient beings alike. Many influential Western aesthetic theories inspired by the paradigmatic experience of high art and beauty assume a singular subject, an individual with a cultivated taste. It is the ultimate privacy of the self that entails the possibilities of many familiar aesthetic theses. However, contemplating the everyday aesthetic experience, such as Ge-Wu experience, I want to propose a somewhat radical idea. The aesthetic experience itself is typically not individual, but collective. I do not merely mean what we often find collective fact in our everyday life, in our aesthetic life. For instance, as a film legend, Jackie Chan is not an individual as shown in the movies, but a stunt team with Jackie Chan himself and a dozen stuntmen. Or in a jam session, when we feel we lose ourselves in a collective musical creation, which is possible only when all the individuals do not cling to their own rhythm and intention. Rather, I want to suggest that many perfectly private and individual aesthetic experiences are possible only because of the collective underneath. Unlike the aesthetic experience associated with the lonely artist heroes, unprecedented masterpieces of art, and superlative experience of aesthetic excellence, everyday aesthetic experience such as Gewu has the strength to help reveal the truth. Here is an example from my own experience. During one business trip, I was lying on the bed after a long day, trying to get to sleep. Suddenly, I noticed that crickets were chirping outside under my window. I probably had heard them earlier when other things occupied me. I never paid much attention until now, and it brought about an ineffable moment of deep feelings. Autumn is here, I murmured, with a melancholy suddenly coming over me. This lonely traveller in a strange place on a cool autumn night, with cricket chirping by the window. It was a perfect, everyday aesthetic moment, and felt so personal. Cricket's song and autumn melancholy come together so naturally at the moment, as if I suddenly discovered a beautiful resonance between them when I was fully attentive. But if one look closely, this particular personal experience of mine is possible only because it is collective. The truth is that this particular aesthetic experience of cricket sounds is a cultural creation and lodged in me through my entire life of being Chinese and an enthusiast of classical poetry. In Chinese literature, knowing ladies in spring and susceptible gentlemen in autumn may summarize a large group of works. Autumn melancholy is a familiar aesthetic category in Chinese classical poetry, with numerous influential lines throughout history that become part of my language, shaped my taste, and constitute my emotional life. I am a susceptible gentleman in autumn, like many of my predecessors, and we share and pass on this particular autumn melancholy provoked by the cricket songs. In this experience, it's not only about relationality that we are related to one another, to all things between heaven and earth, to the cosmic flux. There is also the relationality that we coexist and co-constitute. Because of the entanglement with others and other things, we become and sustain ourselves. Now, let me move to the final part of my talk. After some preparation with a review of Gewu, we come back to the aesthetics of care. Cheng ren zhi mei indeed evolves a care relation between humans in which ethical and aesthetic consideration is encouraged. Saito has provided a strong argument for the structural similarities between care ethics and aesthetic experience. She also explores the care relation between humans and things in the material world. Here I'd like to add some thoughts in light of Chinese philosophy and aesthetics. The new Confucian Gewu inevitably leads us to cultivate what Fang Dongmei calls the sense of comprehensive harmony. As integral to the Neo Confucian ideology, 民包物语, literally, people are my siblings and things are my kind. The Gewu experience helps us to recognize as well as feel universal relationality, as I mentioned before. In the book Zhongyong, or Doctrine of the Mean, it says, able to give its full development to one's own nature, one can do the same to the nature of other people. Able to give its full development to the nature of other people, one can give their full development to the natures of things. Able to give their full development to the natures of things, one can assist the transforming and nourishing power of heaven and earth. able to assist the transforming and nourishing power of heaven and earth, one may, with heaven and earth, form a ternium. This passage is extremely influential in Confucianism, in which we may find what we call Confucian cosmological responsibility. That is to say, self-cultivation does not end with the flourishing of oneself and the human race, but it has to extend to the fulfillment of natures of all things, sentient or non-sentient beings alike. Humans are the so-called 五行之华, the flowers of the five agencies, or 万物之灵, the most intelligent of all beings. We have the ability and duty to assist the transforming and nourishing powers of heaven and earth. With this grand cosmic picture in mind, the notion of 格物, investigation of things, inevitably develop into 成物, or the fulfillment of things. 成物 is also a notion from the book Zhongyong, or the Doctrine of the Mean. According to it, Confucian's self-cultivation of cheng, integrity and sincerity, does not merely accomplish the fulfillment of oneself, but also fulfills other people and things. The fulfillment of oneself is called 人, human-heartedness, while the fulfillment of things is called 智, wisdom. In Confucianism, we are not only responsible for our personal growth or the flourishing of human race, but held responsible for the full development to the natures of all things. This Confucian cosmological responsibility, 成己成物, and its related ideas offer a Chinese argument for the aesthetics of care that resonate with Saito's proposal. I believe within a moment of aesthetic enlightenment caused by 格物 experience, thanks to the ordinary, the familiar, and the commonplace, we realize that we are at home, accompanied by heaven and earth, by 10,000 things, by my siblings, and by my kind. We are united in a great transformation and shall never depart. This feeling provides a strong incentive to fulfill our cosmological responsibility for things around us, namely 成物, that is to say, to help with the full development to the natures of things, allows the fulfillment of things, and assist the transforming and nourishing powers of heaven and earth. This responsibility requires us to look after things, to maintain them in a good state, to repair and restore them when they are damaged, and most importantly, to actively do our part to allow them to achieve perfection on their own terms. Now, let me end with another beautiful poem. In the Wuyi Mountain by 谢秉德. 10年无梦得还家，独立清风野水崖。天地寂寥山雨歇，己身修得道梅花。Here I provide the general meaning of this poem. I find I can never translate the full charming meaning of it. That's all my talk. Thank you for your time.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Hi.
Hello, Xiao. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. How's it going?
Oh, finally met you.
Likewise. Yeah. Xiao and I kind of have known one another, 4 years now, and we haven't spoken or seen each other. So here we go.
Yeah.
Very
pleasure.
We have about 15 minutes or so for a conversation, and we have some lovely people in the audience, so to speak, in the circle. And I can just say something, and maybe it will arouse some interest and a debate. First thing, Xiao, I wanted to say is I'm really grateful to you for introducing us to this sacred dimension of beautiful Chinese philosophical and spiritual tradition, through which we do not forget that not only we are connected with things in the everyday, but also things that we refer to in the Western world in terms of the past, right? I think it's very, very important, because I don't really believe in these rigid categories of the past, present, and future. There are different, different modalities of how we can think and be in relation to space-time, if you like. And in many indigenous traditions, there is no such concept as past, present, future, and even linguistically or semantically, like Aboriginal Australian indigenous languages do not really have a past sense of the things that happen. If I were to translate them in English, they happen. So we in English we could say it happened in 1584, but a more way in this ontology would be to say it happens. So it's not that it happened and it no longer happens. No, it happens in eternity. So this reference to being able to reunite or be one with things that allegedly happened in the past through sense of smell, for example, or touch, and so on. It has absolutely profound consequences, I think, for our being and relationality. And this is what makes aesthetics truly cosmic, right? So this is it's a wonderful dimension of your talk, and I really appreciate it because it's true. And one question I had for you is: we have discussed in the last 3 days quite a few interconnected spheres of being, interconnected in the sense that, again, they're one, right? Yesterday we had a discussion, for example, with Georgios Tsagdis and Hester Reeve about minerals or stones, which was, again, quite mind-blowing when you bring to the fore the everyday objects like a stone on the street and engage with it philosophically. Everything changes, your perception changes, and the world changes with you. So the question that I have for you is stones, but in your talk, I think you have mentioned to me a characteristically Chinese sphere of being, to which you refer to as heavens, right? And I wonder, heavens, yeah. So we could say the sky, but the heavens. And I wonder, in terms of this, engagement with the heavens, I understand what you mean by the earth. You said, the heavens and the earth. Again, earth is the stones, trees. In a way, water is part of the earth as well. But heavens is something else. And heavens is not really the domain of human beings, right? We can try to reach, we can try to colonize the space, but it's not our domain like it is for birds, for example. Right? So, and I wonder, what do you make out of it in terms of this engagement and oneness with the heavens?
Thank you so much for the very inspiring comment and question. I want to say a little bit more about your comment. I think actually you expressed much better than I did. You did a good job to summarize something I would like to share with, but I feel I didn't do it well. We have a professor here. He just wrote a book called Beyond Four Seasons. So in that book, he wants to what you just said, something about Chinese understanding of time. We don't have the same kind of linear understanding of time, current and future, and also he's working on aesthetics. He did a very good job present this with lots of artistic practice from the Chinese tradition. So I think similar-minded we are. Yeah, that's something I would like to share with you. If his book is translated, I will send you one copy. Yeah, and then about your question, I think it's very hard question because Tian, which I translated into heavens, because of the tradition. We when in the past, like when we translate Chinese classics, we render Chinese character, the word Tian in heavens, but this would be a little bit misleading because there is a question tradition behind the idea of heavens, but the Chinese the original word would be tian. Tian is not something transcendental. It's not something separate from human being, because the character itself actually the origin character from the oracle bones. It looks like a human person. A big human person. So it's very hard to say it's like a person or it's human anyway. But Tian, for in many like different classics, there would be different understanding. But basically, we would understand Tian is something. In some metaphysical level, it's everything, including the earth. So that would be Tian. Tian would be the universe, thing all together, including human beings, all things within. It would be something without the outside. That would be Tian. So everything would be together. That's one of the metaphysical meaning of Tian. But when we present the idea of Tian in contrast with Di, we would say, okay, this contrast, there's a distinction. So Tian would be something, for example, some we associate with celestial. Is that the correct word? Like stars, suns, moon, all this phenomenon. Something about four seasons. About the transformation power. And D, we would say in the Chinese traditional philosophy, we would say it's more like material thing. So it provides material, but that's a very complicated concept. I don't want to mislead you by giving you very simplified answers. There's a different meaning of Tian in different places. This is something hard for people to learn Chinese. Our language is very contextual, so it depends where you use it. For example, in the philosophy of music, where that I'm familiar with, Tian is associated with music, and Di or earth are associated with ritual, Li Yi. So music and ritual, that's also a very important concept from the Chinese Confucianism. But we would understand like Tian somehow is associated with music instead of earth is associated with music. And also according to the cosmology, like explained in terms of qi. Tian would be consist of lighter qi, and Di would be consist of heavier qi. So they are basically the same thing. It's just they have different functions. And they play different roles in the transformation of the cosmos. Yeah, and also, so things can get very complicated. In the classical China, we have this hierarchy thing, hierarchy society. So then Tian would be somehow be the father, male, all this dominant or authoritative image. But I don't think that's philosophical. That's not philosophical. It's more conventional. But in many classical philosophical texts, I think Tian is very Tian Di, the form different words like yin and yang. Oh, okay, yeah, that yin and yang also associated with Tian Di or heaven and earth. So they play different roles. There's no necessary kind of hierarchy in I think in many classic texts, but in the history, people draw on this kind of ideas, and they would to justify Tian is somehow more sacred, more powerful, and dominant. But I don't think we have to recognize people can use the classics to do different things. But when we confront with the philosophy itself, I think Chinese philosophy don't justify those kind of ideas. Yeah. I'm not sure if I understand your question and answered your question.
You did it. The thing is that it's just fascinating that we live in the same world, but we come from such different soils that we can open each other's eyes on the world in such different ways, and the Chinese tradition clearly seems so rich and so different. So I really hope that we can continue our conversations, because I learn a lot with every word, even though these words are in English, right?